I want to bring in MS Now's Ariel Hickson at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Kevin Fry is on Capitol Hill. Stuart Stevens is senior advisor at the Lincoln Project and author of the book, It Was All a Lie, about President Trump's Republican Party. David Graham is a staff writer for The Atlantic. So, Ariel, bring us up to speed. What's it like where you are?
Well, you know, Chris, travelers are still arriving 4 to 5 hours ahead of their flight. Yet, if you can take a look behind me, things have definitely changed dramatically. Now, it is Tuesday. This is not the rush of the weekend travel, but right now, wait times are about 30 minutes long. When passengers get to the front of this line, they have this kind of look on their face like they're shocked. They're like, oh, okay, this is good. Yet there's still some frustration here because on the back end of all of that, once they get through security, they still have to wait 3 or 4 hours for their flight and or try to change that moving forward. And that is just what we're seeing as kind of the ripple effect of how Congress has influenced so many people across the country, as TSA officers have been calling out. Here at Atlanta Airport, 40% of TSA officers have called out sick. I spoke to a union rep who just say that at this point there might be a little bit of a lull that you're seeing right now, but he says that there's no end in sight, and he really imagines that this could get worse over time. And passengers really have a lot of sentiment for these TSA officers who are working without a paycheck, showing up every single day to make sure that passengers can get by safely. Take a listen.
Treat people how you want to be treated. You are not in these long lines. You're not standing outside. You do not have small babies. We need you to get your act together so that these people can get back to work, get paid as they should be, because they are doing the work. That's my message.
One new update. Now airlines are starting to take charge. Delta has suspended all courtesy and family police escorts for members of Congress moving forward. So a bit of a shift here. Chris?
Okay, thank you so much for that. Stuart, when we have people who are waiting 4 hours in line, or in that case, having to show up 4 hours ahead, you go on websites of some airports, because I've done it, and it won't tell you anymore how long the wait is, right? So you don't have any choice but to try to get there early. Why does it have to get this bad for lawmakers to get serious about potentially fixing this horrific situation?
Well, look, it's interesting you say that, because I'm flying tomorrow, and I was checking on the TSA app, which is usually pretty good about wait times, and it says that it hasn't been updated in 2 weeks, which isn't particularly helpful. Look, I think this just all arrives out of the sort of necessity of the being of Donald Trump. He cares nothing about solutions. He picks these fights. He sees everything as sort of a test of will and manhood. So this is about save, really? Really? That's what it's about? You know, it costs a lot more to drive now. You can't fly. There's a war. I mean, how's this going? And I just have to say, the idea of putting ICE agents who aren't doing anything there, it's very difficult to assert that this is not to just customize people to having ICE agents everywhere in their lives, like at the polling booths. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think it's a very deliberate tactic here to use ICE as a sort of back pocket paramilitary force that will enforce whatever this president administration wants to do.
I want to talk a little bit more about that last point in a bit, but let me go back, David, to where we are right now, because you have this new piece out that points out what we're seeing at the airports is part of a much bigger problem, which is that the American system of air travel is essentially broken. Is that the real story that we're seeing play out in real time?
I think for the president, there's a very unfortunate collection of things going on. We've seen sustained disinvestment in things like air traffic control, in airports themselves. We've seen, the first fatal crash of an American carrier in 16 years came at the beginning of his term last year. And all of these things are coming together, and I think Americans are rightly upset. Broadly, I think this reflects the kind of dysfunction we have in politics. These problems just don't get solved, and instead we have kind of short-term solutions. Or in this case, the president refusing to agree to a short-term solution that would ease some of these lines.
And to that point, Kevin, lawmakers can say all they want, but we were supposedly close to a deal before, and the president nixed it. Is what you're hearing now different? What are you hearing now?
Yeah, I mean, look, the contours of this apparent agreement that came out of this meeting last night between GOP senators and the president is not all that different than what was pitched to the president in the days that preceded it, basically carving out most of ICE, if not all of it, and then funding everything else around it and doing ICE later. My understanding, based on talking to various senators, that really what they're going to do here is focus on, as I just mentioned, funding everything except for the ERO, the enforcement and removal portion of ICE, and then try to get some of those reforms sprinkled in. At the end of the day, what most senators are saying, though, on both sides of the aisle is, trust and verify. We don't have a document in front of us yet. Particularly Democrats remain very skeptical because they don't know exactly what this is going to shake out as, because we've not heard from the president himself. But nonetheless, a degree of optimism. Here's Senator Thom Tillis.
It sounds like from those who went to the meeting yesterday afternoon that they made progress. So, it's an amazing thing around here how things get settled just before recess. But we'll see whether or not that forcing mechanism works this time. I, for one, think if we don't, we need to stay here until we get it done.
And thus is the nature of Congress, because there are kind of two confluencing things going on here. One, it is a deadline that is Friday, that they are supposed to leave town for the Easter, Passover, etc. holiday break. And also the fact that, as we have seen in past shutdowns, it is the horrific images we're seeing coming out of airports that amp up the pressure here on Capitol Hill. People get calls from their constituents, and there is a drive to actually find a solution.
Well, I guess that leads us to the original question, Stuart, which is there's no doubt, because every member of Congress I've talked to has said that they are getting the complaints. Like, they're not immune to the fact that their constituents are very unhappy. But ultimately, is this all about Donald Trump, and who's going to convince him?
Well, look, let's go back to kind of how this started. You can make a good case that we're at war in Iran because of the Epstein files. Now he wants to change to change the subject from the Epstein files. Now he wants to change the subject from the war in Iran, so we have this crisis at airports. And one of the ironies here is standing in line longer at the airports is an effort for Donald Trump to make it you stand longer in line to vote, because that's what he wants to do when he does away with mail-in voting, which people love, and it's completely fraud-free. I never saw any fraud in all the elections I did. So, look, I think this is just an incoherent mind at work that's sort of bouncing around between this issue and that issue. There's no philosophical, conservative element to this. Like, we can resolve this by whatever. So you end up with chaos. And when you have a party that the people inside that party are afraid to speak out, I mean, you have Kennedy and Cruz saying we could have solved this, but they're not really saying it very loud, and they're really not saying it to Donald Trump. They're just kind of covering their own ass. It's a really bad, dysfunctional situation. But, at the heart of it, the Republican Party is not a governing party now.
So that points out the two things, David, right? Part of this is the politics. There's another part of it that's the safety, which brings us back to your original point, which is about the problems within the system that existed before there was this partial government shutdown. And I wonder if you think, should we be concerned that if there even is a deal, policymakers will just move on? Because I was thinking that very recently, in the face of that scathing preliminary report after the deadly Potomac River crash, which concluded there were problems long before the crash, systemic problems, here we are again.
I mean, I think it's an almost certainty. We've seen Congress decline to take action on a bill that would make reforms recommended by regulators following that crash in January 2025. The FAA has acted, but Congress has not. And the FAA can take some actions. We've heard the Secretary of Transportation out saying that, the Newark Airport is functioning on floppy disks. We saw major dysfunctions at Newark Airport just in the last few days. Reports of smoke. We've seen wings getting clipped, a near miss. The FAA needs more funding and needs reforms, but that's something that Congress has simply been unwilling to do anything about. And consistently, the government seems to want the air traffic system to work cheaply, but also very effectively. And at some point, there's a trade-off, and I think travelers are starting to see that.